Every day, millions of drivers across India perform the same automatic ritual, waiting for the nozzle clicking into place to fill their tanks. This routine fuels a landscape of over 300 million vehicles, one of the largest and most diverse motorized populations on Earth. But over the last 2 years, the fluid in those pumps changed. There was no national referendum and no major warning campaign before the standard fuel was phased out. Across a network of roughly 90,000 stations, the petrol that millions relied on was replaced by a new blend called E20. E20 contains 20% ethanol. For the owners of older vehicles manufactured before April 2023, that ratio introduced a new mechanical anxiety, as their engines were never designed to process that much alcohol. Because the rollout was nationwide and total, most drivers discovered that the alternative blends they used to rely on had simply vanished from the pump. The government upgraded the entire country's fuel infrastructure years ahead of its own schedule, but in the process, it forced millions of legacy vehicle owners into a transition they never signed up for. To the architects of this policy in New Delhi, the move wasn't a gamble. It was a strategy 20 years in the making, beginning with a modest 5% ethanol mandate in 2003. In 2021, Prime Minister Narendra Modi accelerated the timeline significantly, ordering the country to hit the 20% target by 2025, 5 years earlier than the original 2030 deadline. This map illustrates the first pillar of the plan, energy security. India spends billions on imported oil. Every drop of homegrown ethanol reduces that. The second pillar targets the environment. Replacing petrol with ethanol lowers tailpipe emissions, helping India meet its international climate pledges. The third pillar is agricultural. The state creates a guaranteed buyer for surplus sugarcane, turning a crop that depressed prices into a national energy asset. From a high-level policy perspective, E20 looks like a rare policy win that serves the economy and the environment and the rural farmer at the same time. But those high-level wins collide with a different reality once that fuel enters an actual engine. For the average driver, the primary issue isn't geopolitical, it is mileage. The auto industry eventually admitted that using E20 results in a fuel efficiency drop of between 2 and 4% compared to previous blends. For a working-class commuter on a scooter, that small percentage is a literal pay cut, forcing them to spend more money just to cover the same distance. The frustration was compounded by a breakdown in communication. Automakers initially expressed concerns about a lack of long-term testing for older cars, before abruptly reversing their stance and declaring the fuel safe. Even those safety assurances came with fine print, suggesting that any potential damage could be avoided if the driver followed more rigorous and expensive maintenance schedules. By the middle of 2026, the quiet frustration at the petrol pump escalated into a legal challenge before the Supreme Court. During those proceedings, the government's own attorney general told the court that the state was experimenting with the 20% blend. The government leader tried to walk back that statement, but for millions of people already paying for a less efficient fuel, the idea that they were part of a massive experiment felt like a confirmation of their worst fears. The real crisis wasn't just the mechanical change, but the feeling that institutional transparency had been sacrificed to meet an ambitious deadline. Despite the experiment comment, the data from millions of miles driven since the rollout tells a nuanced story. While the mileage loss is a documented fact, the widespread engine failures many feared haven't materialized. The fuel functions as intended, it's just less efficient than the petrol it replaced. Regulators are already moving past this debate. As the numbers on this pump show, new standards have already been notified for E22, E25, and even E30 blends, signaling that ethanol content will only continue to rise. The phase-out is permanent. The older, more compatible blends are gone from the pumps, and there is no plan to bring them back. This tension between a driver's wallet and a country's climate goals isn't unique to India. It's becoming a standard feature of the modern energy transition. This highway represents the central paradox of the green transition. The urgent need for cleaner energy is constantly colliding with the massive, aging infrastructure that society still relies on to function every day. In the E20 rollout, the costs of that collision were placed almost entirely on the people, who couldn't afford to trade in their old cars for newer, compliant models. If future climate policies are to succeed, they have to account for transitional equity, ensuring that the drive toward a cleaner future doesn't leave the most vulnerable citizens stalled at the side of the road.